Good morning, friends. This is Pastor Carol Jeanette, interim pastor at Lord of Life Lutheran Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I hope you're doing well. Please know that you are in my prayers. Well, today is April 17th. The Safer at Home order in Wisconsin has just been extended to May 26th, which is the day after Memorial Day. And it's been announced that schools will not reopen during this school year. A few restrictions are being loosened. And of course, there are people who are challenging the extension of the order. So life in light of COVID-19 marches on. And outside my window, it's snowing on April 17th. And that's Wisconsin, I guess. Now, one of my uses for these contemplations is kind of on the selfish side, is to work through some of my thinking, especially in light of my faith and in light of the situation at this point. Yesterday, I was part of a couple conversations that got me thinking, and so I invite you, if you would like, to listen in as I try to make sense of some things in these. Now, something important for you to know is that my underlying thought for all of this is a basic assumption that the way one thinks about a phenomenon governs the way in which one responds to it. So, the first conversation that I was part of was in an online meeting of clergy from our synod. Toward the end of the meeting, one of the pastors was talking about a different meeting she had been in, one sponsored by ELCA churchwide offices and their coaching ministry. In that meeting, they had talked about the trauma that is accompanying COVID-19 and about how the traumatic effects of this virus are going to be broad and long-lasting. Their assumption, I think, is that a very broad swath of people are or will be experiencing significant trauma. Not just those who have been sick and had family members die, but people who've suffered financial difficulties or isolation or lockdowns and school closures. And the thinking is that it's crucial that coaches be able to work with trauma victims. Okay, that makes sense. The second conversation that we had was with our son and daughter-in-law who live in the Chicago area. Life is not easy for them right now between trying to open a new business and caring for 3 small children and keeping a boss happy who doesn't want to hear children in the background of business calls. Now, they're okay. They're not great, but they're okay. I asked them about good friends of theirs who live in Brooklyn, New York. Their friends believe that their 5-year-old son had the virus, although they couldn't get him tested. The kids have both been home from school for weeks. Both parents are working full-time from home. Grateful that they have a house and aren't cooped up in a small apartment, although in New York, houses are pretty small. Dad has a new job and is trying to prove his worth while working from home with small kids. Mom is working full-time but is exhausted and just received a paid week off from work. Not vacation, which was really a nice gift, but it's time that she needs desperately. Everything in New York is more intense than it is in Wisconsin. Even for those who don't have family members hospitalized and those who still have jobs. But this is my point. I'm not sure that either of these young families, although they're deeply challenged right now, would say that they're suffering trauma. So remember my underlying assumption, that the way one thinks about a phenomenon governs the way in which one responds to it. So I'm wondering if we need to be careful about our use of the word trauma. It's a pretty heavy word. I think of war as being traumatic, or abuse, or severe accidents. And I think the reality is that the variation across the world of the effects of this virus on people and their lives means that there are some for whom this virus is truly, really traumatic. It's dramatically and permanently life-changing in negative ways. But I think we need to be careful about how broadly we use the word. If we think about most of the challenges that are being faced by a majority of the population right now as trauma, then I think our response to that way of thinking about this is to focus more on the pain and the difficulty and the loss that we're experiencing. And that's real, but that's not all there is. If we shift the way we think and focus more on strengths and look at the strengths that we have and how we're getting through it, then I think our response is different. The way we think about something governs the way we respond to it. Thinking about something as trauma kind of leads us to responding from fear and hopelessness. But if we shift that and think of it as challenge, then I think our response is more from strength and hope. And this isn't really an either or, but I do think that the more we can focus on challenge and strengths to respond, the better off we are. Maybe you remember there was a verse that I used, I think, last week from the Revelation to John, a verse I love. The verse is God saying, "Behold, I make all things new." This way of looking at things offers a different way of thinking about challenges and a different way of responding to them. Now, chances are pretty good, I think, that we're not going to return to normal after this, whatever normal was. And yes, I think there are significant challenges for people, some people and families, and there has been trauma for some that will have long-lasting effects. But for the majority of us, I think if we look at this as challenge and we focus on our strengths and the gifted creative ways we're responding to it rather than the negative effects of trauma, if we trust that God is making all things new and is going to bring good out of this mess, and already has brought good out of this mess, it seems to me to be a much healthier and more faithful way of both hanging in there and being able to move into a future that looks a little bit different from the past. And I think that's a good thing. Now, these are just some of my thoughts, folks, in hard times. You may or may not agree with them. That's fine. But my trust is that God is in the midst of pain and heartache and suffering. But my trust is also that God brings life out of death, that God brings life out of pain and heartache and suffering. Perhaps a big part of trusting God through this involves keeping our eyes and hearts and minds focused on what new life-giving things God is bringing about. Are there times when that seems impossible? When our heartache and the heartache of the world darkens our eyes and weighs down our hearts to the point that it's almost impossible to even see God in this? Yep, no doubt. I was there early this week. But I keep reminding myself, and I'll keep reminding you and ask you to keep reminding yourselves that as an Easter people, we know and trust that God brings life out of death. We are a people of hope who trusts that God makes all things new. May you walk in that hope today and in the days to come, my friends. Peace be with you.